I hope you all enjoyed speaking with the vendors. I can see a lot of excited talks going on back there, but if you will go ahead and make your way back to your seats so we can continue. Awesome, thank you. Before we bring on Dr. Yoon, I wanted to discuss a great asset here at the association, especially for those of you you're in your first few years in the business. Our Young Professionals Network, which we call YPN, is a great resource to get involved in the industry and to learn, network, and grow your business with other industry professionals. So be sure to stop by the YPN booth today if you haven't already for a chance to win a gift bag. YPN will also be hosting an Appraisal 101 class on May 20th from 1 to 3 p.m. at Greater Nashville Realtors, and Clint Balker, who was up here earlier today, will be hosting that event. If you would like to sign up for this class, you can scan the QR code on the screen. Now for today's second session, sponsored by THDA, I'm honored to welcome to the stage Dr. Lawrence Yoon. Dr. Yoon is live and in person, which we're very excited about. He oversees and is responsible for a wide range of research activities for the association, including NAR's existing home sales statistics, affordability index, and the home buyers and sellers profile report. In addition, he regularly provides commentary on the real estate market trends for its 1.5 million plus realtor members. Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Yoon.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Very great to be here. Nashville, every time I visit, it has transformed again. It is, without a doubt, one of the fastest growing city, transformative. People who may have lived in Nashville, say 20 years ago, and now arrive, they will not recognize what has happened to the downtown, the liveliness, and they will be shocked by the home prices, how it has changed in 20 years. And the reason for that is the attractiveness. People want to come here. You are continuing to see many new residents from other states coming in. You have companies. Companies begin to decide, where do I expand, or where do I begin to start my business? And they consider Tennessee as one of the great destinations. So even the stadium, named as the Nissan Stadium, is a Japanese auto company, I think. But as they are thinking at the US consumer market, they said, well, we don't want to produce in Japan. We want to produce in America, easier transport. Where in America do we want to produce? Well, they selected here this local region, obviously due to the business-friendly environment that is taking place. So thank you for inviting me to participate, President Kevin, for inviting me. And also glad to see Tennessee State Association Realtor President Regina from Memphis here, because I see Regina in many of the realtor functions across the country, because she is representing your state, Tennessee. And furthermore, one thing that we heard last week, I think it was last week in Washington, D.C., where we had about 8,000 realtors from across the country. Many people from Tennessee showed up to talk with their members of Congress. But one of the things that Tennessee realtors were definitely relaying message to us and relaying message to the members of Congress is to say that veterans, please do not leave them out, because under the new rules, we don't want the veterans somehow to go by themselves in trying to find home, because home buying is a very complicated process. Many past veterans have said, oh, I love my realtor, the service they provided. But if we lose that link, it will be very, very difficult. So that is the one message that we are relaying in Washington with urgency to assure that the veterans can, through the home buying process, is able to pay their buyer agent and not be excluded, say, because under the current rule, if you get a Veterans Affairs mortgages, you cannot pay buyer agent any fees. So that is not the proper under this new lawsuit settlement that's at place. the housing market condition, certainly again, Nashville, if you look at the long term, it's been quite magnificent. But last year, it was a difficult environment to conduct business because sales activity was simply not there. So even though people who have been in the business for a long period have seen just quite an astonishing growth here in Nashville region, but if you just look at the past couple of years, it's been more competitive, less inventory out there, more difficult circumstance. So when are we going to see some turnaround beginning to occur? So before that, let me turn towards national data, because many local market would follow this trend. Some of the data at the local MLS may not be able to go back for a long history, but at the national level, where we have a more longer-term history, what we are finding is that the home sales last year, once the December numbers were all tallied up, was the lowest level since 1995. Lowest level since 1995. We know that housing market is cyclical business. It goes up, it goes down. So in a good year, as a realtor, you should not be spending all that money. You should be preparing for a potential downturn that may occur at some point, but it's a cyclical business. But to be down at lowest since 1995, just consider how old are you? And of course, we always want to be younger, considering our age. But to say that the figure is that low somehow does not make logical sense, especially considering that we have a rising population in the US. In fact, if you compare today's population to 1995, there are 70 million more people living in the country, 70 million more people. Birth rate exceeding the death rate, plus legal immigration. I don't want to go into illegal immigration. Legal immigration, and you have 70 million people living in the country, and most Americans would assess their American dream, improvement in their life. That part includes owning a home. So you say, well, 70 million more people living in the country, how is it our home sales are back at 1995? If there's any good news, without using any statistical modeling, just simple common sense is to say that there's probably a sizable pent-up demand provided the conditions are right. Say mortgage rate behaving a little better, meaning a little lower, or more inventory showing up, then we can have more business. So you can easily imagine that over the next 10 years, that 8 of those 10 years could be an improving year for home sales, simply because home sales cannot remain at this low level with so much population that's happening in the country. Now, the interesting part is that for the realtors, it was a difficult year last year. Far fewer business opportunity. In fact, it was also down year in 2022. So it's 2 straight years of a sizable decline in unit sales. I think 20% decline followed by another 20% decline. But for the home builders, it's a different story. Home builders are actually standing on their feet. And in fact, if you had invested in home builder stock a couple of years ago, say KB Homes, Toll Brothers, other publicly listed home builder stock, a couple of years ago, your money would have doubled. Home builders are doing increased sales, and in fact, last year, they recorded their 3rd best performance since the foreclosure crisis. So the builders are doing well, but the realtor face challenges. What could explain this? When we always think of builders and realtors in the same industry. In fact, I know many couples. One is a realtor, spouse is a home builder, same industry. But what could explain for the divergence between builders and realtors? And the answer looks like this: inventory availability or non-availability. The top line, the red line, is existing home inventory. So you walk around a nice neighborhood and you look for sale signs. How many listings? And it's been trending down, 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 with last year at historically low levels. You don't have inventory, you cannot get business done. Well, the bottom line, blue line, is newly constructed home inventory with construction cranes, new subdivisions. So 10, 15 years ago, builders would represent less than 10% of inventory, less than 10% of total home sales. But now, builders are representing about 1/3 of all inventory. And it's not that the blue line is rising fast, it's more like the red line has greatly shrunk. Now, we know one of the reasons why the red line has shrunk, the inventory is not being there, is because homeowners love their 3% mortgage rate, 4% mortgage rate, and they're saying, nope, I'm not gonna move. I'm enjoying my 3%, and I am not going to give this up. Which is the reason why we hear, again, through the volunteer leadership, whether the Nashville Association, President Kevin, Regina from Tennessee Association, all across the country, to say, look, is there something to boost inventory for the country? Because if we had more inventory, we can get more sales done. And one thing that NAR has been looking at is that capital gains exemption, something that you told clients as they were purchasing home many years ago. Buy a home, and when you sell it, you don't have to pay any tax. The capital gains is all yours. $250,000 exemption for a single individual, $500,000 for a married couple. You sell a home, and it's all yours. But what do you know? Today, that figure is insufficient. More and more people are hitting that limit, and just psychologically, of course, home price gain is very good news for homeowners, but if you tell the news that if you sell your home, you have to pay portion to the government, it leaves a very bad taste in people's mouth and say, you know what, I'm gonna change my mind. I'm not gonna list my property. So one way to facilitate more inventory, especially in a fast home price growth model, areas like Nashville, is to change that limit. That limit, $250,000 and $500,000, that has not changed for 25 years. 25 years ago, price of hamburger, price of movie tickets. Well, that figure has not changed 25 years ago, and when it was implemented 25 years ago, it was implemented because they said, look at all the federal income tax. More than 90% of the federal income tax is paid by homeowners, so why don't we just say that when they sell the home, they don't really have to pay tax, so that's why they put that figure. But that figure has not been changed for 25 years, so just out of fairness, we are asking Congress to index to inflation so that when there is an inflation, it just naturally rises, just like price of movie ticket rises, price of hamburger rises, so that fewer homeowners will be ensnared in that tax. So perhaps we can get more inventory. This is a presidential election year, so maybe there's no major legislation upcoming, so maybe it's the first item or one of the first item in 2025 next year. But given that we are getting many nodding of the heads by both aisles of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, independent of who is occupying the presidency next year in the White House, we think there's a good chance that this could happen. So again, trying to release some inventory. Second factor that we've been asking Congress is to say that, well, can we have more inventory if we have some of the mom and pop real estate investors? Not the institutional investors. So you can put some condition to say any real estate investor who owns 10 property or less, or maybe 5 property or less, whatever condition you want to make, not 20,000 properties, but some fewer mom and pop real estate investors. Are you willing to unload one of those property onto the market and you get a tax break? If you sell it to a first-time home buyer, something like that. So again, trying to incentivize using the tax code to bring more inventory. Because again, builders, they just create inventory. Lumber prices fluctuate. There's regulation to overcome. But once they complete the home, even with some incentive, mortgage rate down, buy down, and other incentives, they're still making profits. And that's why their stock prices have doubled in the past couple of years. So given that there is a demand for housing, and the inventory is being satisfied by the builders while the realtors are stuck because homeowners do not want to list, can we get more movements of Americans by providing that tax credit incentive for mom and pop real estate investors, or possibly lifting the capital gains exemption. Another factor that impacts real estate. One factor as to why the business was tough last year is you didn't have inventory. In fact, you knew that you had some multiple offers on some properties, which is a clear indication that not all demand is being satisfied. So it's not like 2008, you list a property, no buyers for 3 months, no buyers for 6 months, price reduction, price reduction. No, it's not that case. It's the case that inventory shows up, homes are being signed under contract usually within 30 days, and then there are multiple offers. Not everyone is able to purchase the home because of the lack of supply. So inventory is one big factor. But the second factor is the monetary policy from Washington, Central Bank, Federal Reserve. The red line is official Federal Reserve policy, which they have a committee, and they say, what do we do? Do we raise rates, keep it steady, or cut interest rates? So the red line is the official policy, while the green line is the indirect effect of that, which is what you care about, mortgage rates. So green line is the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Some consumers paying a little more, other consumers paying a little less, depending on credit score, down payment, and other criteria that you are all familiar with. But what you see is graph begins from 2019, before the arrival of that ugly COVID virus to the country. In the middle is the COVID years. But what you see is that today's interest rate environment is much higher than 2019. So to the degree that 2019, before COVID, was normal, well, we are in a high interest rate environment. We're in a high interest rate environment because Federal Reserve aggressively, again, the red line, aggressively raised interest rate, multiple rounds, I think 11 rounds of rate increases, and consequently mortgage rate hitting 20-year high levels. Now, some people who are in the industry for 40 years will say, oh, 7% mortgage rate, those are no big deal. In fact, my parents purchased their home when the mortgage rates were like 15%. And if I was to ask my parents, did you feel bad that you purchased a home at 15% interest rate? And they will respond, just like other people would respond in a similar situation. It was one of their greatest investment ever, best investment ever, because in America, you can always refinance when the interest rate decline. And in the meantime, home prices would rise, which give people opportunity from their starter home to trade up to the next home and so forth. But mortgage rate today at little above 7%, nonetheless, is higher than 4% or 5% condition. So this shock factor, affordability challenges that arose from higher interest rate, that also pull back some demand. Not all demand, but it pulled back some demand because as reflected in multiple offers, there's still sufficient demand out there. We just need more inventory to satisfy the market. Here's a survey of consumers done by Fannie Mae on a regular basis. They ask questions, various things about home buying. Getting a mortgage, is it difficult? Is it easy to find a home and things like that? And they come up with an index, one figure. So what this figure shows is that the plunge that you see it right at the beginning, that's right in the middle, that is the COVID arrival. So when we were stuck in the basement for the first couple of weeks, I don't care where you were, kitchen table, bedroom, if you cannot open the front door, you are stuck in a basement. So when we were stuck in a basement, there was not a good sentiment out there. But what you see is that in recent months, we are seeing some recovery in the consumer sentiment about home buying. So maybe the mortgage rate being a little stable, people are accepting that we are in a higher interest rate environment. That could be the reason. But let's not get too excited about their latest figure because it's simply coming out of the grave, especially what happened in 2022 when the mortgage rates were much higher. So it's simply coming out. But at least this may imply the worst condition may be behind us. I mean, certainly the sentiment, the worst in the sentiment is behind us. Now, for the closing activity, which is important for your income, because you only get paid from successful outcome. So closing activity show we had an increased activity in 2021 and 2022. I should say 2020 and 2021, when the interest rates were low, we increased activity. Then things began to go down. When the interest rate began to rise, inventory shrank. So what you see on the latest figure is that right now we are no longer seeing year-over-year declines in home sales or any meaningful year-over-year declines. Consumer sentiment about home buying, again, showing some recovery, at least off their low point. Closing activity, which is far more important because your income depends on it, this is showing that we have stopped the bleeding. Before an improvement, you have to stop the bleeding, and the bleeding is coming to an end. So maybe in the second half of the year, we will begin to see year-over-year gains. And given the 70 million more people in the country, maybe this growth can continue such that maybe 8 of the next 10 years could be a growth year. Here's the local market statistics straight off your local association website. A lot of good data. Go there. But what we see is in April, 11% increase in closing compared to the year before. So you are doing much better than the rest of the country. You are climbing out of the housing market doldrum much before ahead of rest of the country. And the pending contracts, as you see, are still in the figure. Let me see, pending. Well, that's a disappointment. It's down 6%, which means that we are not fully on the recovery stage, so maybe it will be a little bumpy. So closing is up, pending is down, so maybe it will be a little bouncy for a few months before we see some steady increase. The inventory condition is a little improvement from extreme tight inventory conditions, so maybe this is an early indicator because consumers want to see more choices. And the median home price at $500,000 level, again, this would be a sticker shocker for people who were not in Nashville or left Nashville 20 years ago and they come back. Only other city that has resemblance of this huge transformation of downtown skyline changing in 20-year time span is Austin, Texas. So whether it's Austin, Texas or Nashville, they are seeing very similar patterns where someone 20 years ago, say they went to a coma and now they wake up 20 years later, they were not able to recognize what has happened. Or maybe there's something about country music that's really influencing Austin and Nashville. Here's what your peers are doing currently in the marketplace. So just say, I guess my staff does a lot of data analysis, and as they're pumping out data, I try to say, oh, this looks interesting. Maybe some realtors will find value in this. So this is what they have been doing as of April. So if home is sitting on the market for a long period, you have to offer some price discount. So we know that. So you see the actual figures as to what your peers are doing. So you may not know how much of a price discount do they do, but if the home in the first, say, 2 weeks, among those homes that is not getting multiple offers among those homes. So it looks like most home sellers assume there will be about 5% price negotiation. So even if the home is signed in the first 2 weeks, 5% price negotiation, deal. They seem like that's what the people are doing. And then if the home sits on the market for, say, 91 days, 7.4% price reduction, and then over 120 days, 9% price reduction. That's on pending. When you get a pending contract, don't go home and open the champagne bottle because there's a lot of contingency you have to satisfy. Well, if you move to the next column on the closing, the last column, you see even bigger price declines because you have to negotiate for a few other contingency to actually go to the closing table. So just some interesting data that you may be able to utilize or you think about if somehow you mispriced the home at the beginning and home is sitting on the market a long period, what your peers are doing. Now the lawsuit settlement, as an economist, just looking at the economist's perspective, I don't like it for many, many reasons. But one thing that this price negotiation is also introducing is the following. Before, everything was transparent. You know what the seller was willing to offer to the buyer agent when they were come in. Now You cannot put a yard sign or all this, or you got to get $5,000 fine. So I don't know how you need to communicate, or you'll be constantly on the phone, talking to people. What are you going to offer? All this. So now you have to introduce a huge friction and huge headache to the system. But one of the things that could happen is that realtors play fair. They want to be very fair, but they also understand the market circumstance. So if the home is sitting on the market for a long period, the home sellers say, well, I really don't want to reduce price, but I need to have more buyers coming into the open houses. How can we do that? Maybe we can change what we offer to the buyer agent or the buyer brokerages like this. But it's not on the MLS anymore, or come August, it's not going to be there, and you change the figure because you want to incentivize. But let's say during that incentivization, your prior people who were looking at the home seriously consider maybe making an offer was one protected class, while then the next group, because now you are trying to say, well, let's try to offer maybe price discount or maybe different amount on the buyer agent. Unintentional consequence where some people may say this is a violation of fair housing. So the lawyers have created a system where now they could try to look for realtors, again, just trying to adjust on the market circumstances, would be looking for violation of any fair housing. Now, Martin Luther King, he is the reason why we have the Fair Housing Act, and many Asians came to the country around 1970s period, including my parents. So we did not know about the history that occurred in the decade prior. But Martin Luther King looked at the Constitution, looked at the Declaration of Independence, and he said, wow, this is an amazing document. However, Constitution is not right. Declaration of Independence is not right. Supreme Court is not right unless we pass a Fair Housing Act. So now we have a Fair Housing Act where every American would have opportunity to live where they want to live, assuming they meet the criteria in terms of finances, getting the mortgages to purchase. So we have a fair housing to make the American right, make the Constitution right, make the Declaration of Independence right. So realtors are following the code to assure that we have fair housing. Yet market circumstances dictating that we may have to do a price cut. And some people may say, well, let's not do a price cut, but let's change the agent fee a little. But the lawyers would be on the fence looking in to see who is breaking the So lawyers right now, again, this has made it less transparent and unintentional. Market changes, they will be looking to see whether or not there will be a violation of fair housing, even though the realtors set up a system so that we don't have violation of fair housing. The media, once the lawsuit settlement came out, somehow is portraying realtors in a disparaging way. Somehow it was anti-competitive, collusion, cartel, and all those other words. But trust me, your clients love you. Your past clients are very satisfied with your service. How do we know? Well, first, we have a survey every year which we conduct. Now, some of the words you may not be able to see it in the back. You will have the slide to go into it. But every year we've been conducting the survey, 1980, 1990, year 2004, whatever it is, we conduct survey. And what we are finding is that the highest compliment from the consumers, would you work with your agent again for the next transaction? 75% said definitely. Would you recommend your realtor to your close business colleagues, your family members? 75% said definitely. There's no other higher compliment than that. Another 15% saying probably. So this is a huge indication of consumer satisfaction. And you are not surprised by it. Why? Because you treat your clients like extended family members. You never cut corners because you know that your business depends on referral in the future. So you have done your job very well, and your clients love you. Yet somehow the lawyer said you cheated your clients. The media is saying that somehow there was a collusion and cartel. So just because there is a negative narrative out there, don't think that your clients are not satisfied. Data clearly show that your clients are super happy with your service. Let me just go back to this. On the way on the right, there are a few unhappy people. Because, like any business, it's never 100% satisfaction. Good thing that there are so many realtors, realtors, 1.5 million realtors, so that if you don't like your realtors, there's so many other options to choose from. But a couple of unhappy homeowners in Missouri decide to sue. Trial lawyers came in, and they said, okay, let's sue the whole industry. Class action lawsuit. So Missouri is a different state, but somehow it impacts Tennessee, it impacts Florida, it impacts all across the country. Settlement does not mean admission of guilt. NAR really had the choice between bad one and a worse one, and we chose the bad one, trying to make sure. You are entrepreneurs, so even though sometimes you say rules are unfair, sometimes you say life is unfair. I always tell that to my son. Sometimes you will encounter certain things in life that is not fair. You can constantly gripe about it, or you can try to change it, or you try to adjust to the new circumstance even though the rules are unfair. In sports games, bad call by the referee, part of the game. But you have to go to the next play and adjust. So realtors will adjust to the new circumstance, but this does not mean that somehow you have done wrong to your clients. Your clients love you because you know that you never cut corners in terms of serving your clients. Here's just more economist thing that in it. So even though we have 1.5 million members, that number may not change all that much. But inside a number, there's a great deal of dynamism. In any given year, we have about 150,000 people who exit. They gave it their entrepreneurial spirit. They said, nope, I tried it, but it's not for me. I'm going to try something else. And then there are other people who are entering. So even though the net number may not change all that much, you have a great deal of dynamism. I only introduced this concept first, as you know, that you will always face competition. But economic textbook, Econ 101, says that there is a monopoly, there's oligopoly, there's different industry, and there's something called perfectly competitive industry. What is a perfectly competitive industry? It is an industry where there's constant flow of people coming in, constant people going out. We are in a perfectly competitive industry out there. It is very competitive. American consumers have the best of options. Full service brokerage, your choice. Discount brokerage, your choice. Some models like iBuyers or We Buy Ugly Home models, commission rebate models. So much choices out there. You don't like to work with any professional you want to do by yourself? Go ahead, do it yourself. Fistful. So much option for American consumers. And American consumers said, I like the way things are working, but the trial lawyers has come in, introduced friction, make it less transparent, and potential for even unintentional violation of the Fair Housing Act if they offer buyer agents fee slightly different from one day to the next condition. Let me now turn to the market. I did not incorporate yesterday's data, which the Wall Street went wild. And today's stock market is hitting new highs. Because they're hitting new highs because they are saying consumer price inflation is trending in the right direction. We are not there at the desired 2% inflation. We are still at, I think, 3.4% in April. So 3.5 in March, 3.4 in April, but we are trending in the right direction. The red line is, I guess, a little more important for the Federal Reserve, is something called core inflation, excluding some of the volatile elements, and it's continuing to come down a little faster. So because of calming inflation, there is a clear expectation that the Federal Reserve can cut interest rate later this year, or if that doesn't happen, certainly in 2025. So with inflation moving better, it's almost inevitable that the interest rate will be declining, or the inflation will be declining, and therefore giving opportunity for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rate later this year. And if it's somehow delayed, then certainly as we go into 2025. But there is one strange component inside the inflation numbers. Price of tomato carries a very small weight. Rent carries a big weight. The way the rent moves is going to move the overall consumer price inflation. And the recent data shows rents rising at about 5.7%. I think yesterday data may show like 5.5%, but still 5.5%. If you were to ask some of the apartment construction companies here, because there's so many apartment construction, what is the rent that you are charging today versus 1 year ago in Nashville? Don't be surprised. Some of the apartment owners are saying, you know what? I had to reduce my rent a bit. What? Nashville? Isn't this a fast-growing city? Yeah, people are moving in. But there has been so much construction of apartments, there is a temporary oversupply. There is temporary oversupply in Atlanta, in Charlotte, and many cities across the country with so much active construction. So Nashville apartment owners will say, we have to reduce rent slightly because we have a temporary oversupply to fill in some of those things. But the government is saying that rents are rising strongly. And this is nationwide apartment construction, which is essentially at a 40-year high levels, 3 consecutive years of 40-year highs. And consequently, apartment vacancy rates are rising. Supply and demand, more vacancy means that the red line, unofficial apartment sector is saying rents are no longer rising nationwide. So that's what we are finding. The rents are no longer rising nationwide according to private sector data, but it's unofficial. But the data that the government is using is the blue line, and the blue line is showing 5.5% increase. Now, it's not true apple-to-apple comparison. There's a little slight difference. I think it's like single-family rentals, and also whether it is a new tenant or existing tenant renewing the lease and things like that. But clearly, there's a divergence between red and the blue. Government is relying on the blue, while the private sector is saying, well, what's happening on the red? I think there is a lag time. So it's just inevitable that the blue line will eventually catch up with the red line, which means that rent component in the consumer price inflation will show calming pattern later this year, and certainly as we go into next year, which means that, again, overall inflation will be calmer and calmer and calmer, just almost inevitable, almost certainty. And therefore, again, Federal Reserve can cut interest rate later this year or early next year. So quickly summarizing sort of my one section of my part before going to the next section, which is much brighter, by the way, is that the rent growth should be calmer, that therefore future CPI should be calmer, and the Fed can cut interest rate about 6 to 8 rounds all the way through 2025. So later this year and 2025. So look for a better interest rate environment. But there is a big red flag. And the red flag is we have a large budget deficit. Blue line is the tax revenue going into Washington. Last year, because of a little shakiness in the stock market, there was a little decline, but now it's anticipated the blue line should be rising given we have an all-time high in the stock market condition. But look at the red bar. That's government spending. So the first half of the graph, 2 lines match up, no big deal. But the second half, things open up. But if you focus specifically on 2020, government spending blew away. 2020, the year of COVID arrival, great uncertainty, and you may say, well, maybe it was justified. We are 4 years out of COVID, and we are spending as if we are in a COVID or some type of national emergency. One has really asked questions to elected officials. How much are we spending for illegal immigrant crossing to the country? In California, anyone can get a hospital care, no questions asked. So I'm sure it's adding to the figure, but maybe other spending as well. But 4 years out of COVID, we are spending as if we are in national emergency. So given large budget deficit, it means government has to borrow more money, More borrowing means less money available for mortgages. Less money available for mortgages imply that when the Fed cuts interest rate, mortgage rate can go down, but it's not going to go down to 3% or 4%. I don't even think it's going to go to 5% mortgage rate. I think the 6% mortgage rate could be the new normal. So today's mortgage rate is a little above 7. I think it may settle down at 6%, and that's about it. Because massive government borrowing just means less money available for mortgage lending out there. Jobs are also important. Nationwide, we're adding job after the COVID disruption that you see at the beginning. So each passing month, more jobs. Unemployment rate is low. Let me, for the sake of time, just go to this. And you look at Tennessee, and people in the back cannot see it. Tennessee is showing 6.0, so it's showing that in Tennessee you have added 6.0% more job now compared to pre-COVID highs. And it's one of the better performers. Only a few states outperformed Tennessee. Dark blue is good, so like Florida, 9.8%, Texas, 9.3%, Rocky Mountain states doing well, Carolina's doing well, but right after that, it would be Tennessee, 6% more jobs. If you look at specifically in Nashville, it looks like the following. Nashville is the top line. District of Columbia, just the city, not the suburb, just the city itself is the red line. To show that, you see how Tennessee has, or Nashville has greatly outpaced, say, sort of comparable city what it was back in the year 2000. Because of so many people coming in, Nissan adding jobs, other company expanding here. So that's why you have housing demand, but that's also why you have all this traffic problem, because infrastructure simply cannot catch up with a fast rising in terms of this job growth. But this is quite amazing. Let me look at the figure. 700,000 to looks like almost 1.2 million. This is like 500,000 additional jobs in the greater Nashville area. How many people can watch the Titans game? 60, 70,000? You are looking at about 8 stadiums full of people with new jobs in Tennessee, in the Nashville area. And that is why housing demand in the long term remains strong, even though in the short term you didn't have inventory and mortgage rates spiked up last year. Homeowners are happy. This is home price appreciation across the country. So Tennessee, 60% price appreciation compared to pre-COVID. So again, homeowners are very content. Your past clients are very happy with your real estate service. So the dark blue, again, would be outperformers. So again, Florida, Rocky Mountain State, and the Tennessee and Carolina is one of the outperformers in terms of price appreciation. And because of that, you know that the homeowners gain wealth. Renters simply spin their wheels. We all know that, but this is the actual data from the Federal Reserve, that typical homeowner has $396,000 in net worth. It includes their retirement account, like 401k, but most of the wealth would be related to housing, especially for middle-income families. Housing would be the big driver of this. While the renters, they're not building wealth. So only way to have that dream home is you have to start someplace, starter home. Put equity into it, sweat equity, remodel, improve, later trade up, then trade up again, trade up, then eventually you will have dream home. People will not have dream home on their first try, but steadily building wealth. People who are a homeowner recently, small wealth. People who are a homeowner for a long period, large wealth. So, but you see the huge gap between the homeowners and others. All cash transaction is on the rise. Maybe this is part of the all-time high in the stock market, and people who are able to sell their home in Chicago, California, who are moving here, and then they can buy all cash. Because even for local residents, it's a sticker shock. For renters who are struggling in Nashville area, but people moving in from California, wow, it's so cheap in Nashville, I'm going to buy all cash. So that could be a driver. So we have seen all cash transaction rising, but I want to emphasize, they're not first-generation home buyers. First-generation home buyers, People who are, say, making all the right decision, they were always studying at school. Then they found a job, they worked little extra hours to improve their lives. Now they're saving money because they want to be part of that American dream. But because they're first-generation buyers, we have to acknowledge the US history. They were unable to get family wealth to help out on home purchase. So this lawsuit settlement, with the buyer agent, how are they going to get paid? In the past, customary, buyers, first-generation buyers, did not have to worry. They find a home which they like, and they say, I want to buy this home, I have savings, I made all the right decision in life. But on the post-lawsuit settlement, again, trial lawyers, some of them are stepping in. On the post-lawsuit settlement, now some buyers may have to think, do they do it by themselves? Of course, they're going to work with an agent because that's important, but they are hoping that the seller will compensate the agent because they don't have the money to pay the buyer agent. So if this is the case, you are essentially knocking off first-generation buyers out of the market if this scenario plays out. And given the US history, it will be primarily minority home buyers who will be knocked out of the market. So the lawyers are able to go to the bank, getting their 1/3 cut or whatever they are getting, but now they're making first-generation buyer potentially much more difficult. We will adjust to the rules. We will explain the buyer agency. We will request the home sellers, the customary or the way to market homes and part. But if there is a potential negative impact, it would reside with the many first-generation buyers. So let me go to the summary and the forecast. So mortgage rate will decline, because first point I mentioned, rents will calm down. Second point, something the Federal Reserve does not want to talk about, but they are aware, community banks are in a little difficult circumstance. Only way to help them is to cut interest rate. So Federal Reserve is looking for the reason to cut interest rate because they want to help out the community banks. The credit spread is a little abnormally high, and I think once that narrows, that will also help on the interest rate environment. So when the interest rate go down, we all know there are more buyers coming in. They say, oh, I cannot qualify at that mortgage rate, but at this, I'm going to try. So you have more buyers coming in. Be on the lookout for more sellers to come onto the market. Tax credit policy changes potentially next year will help, but just market circumstances, I think, will lead to more listings. Why? People are loving their 3% rate, but if they have additional child in the family, are they going to have the baby sleep in the kitchen, or are they going to look for a larger size home? At some point, they're going to say, no, I need a larger size home. We have to give up our 3% mortgage rate. Marriages, divorces happen all the time. Are you going to stick with the person that you really dislike, or say, heck with it, I'm going to sell my home? 7 million Americans turn 65. They want to trade down. Their house is too big. I mentioned about the jobs, but did you know there are 50 million job switches that happened in the past 2 years? In other words, people have different commuting patterns than before. In the past, you have different commuting patterns, you move your home. But this time, people did not move their houses. They're saying, I love my 3%. Then they struggle through the traffic every single day. At some point, they're going to say, well, maybe I need a different house at a closer to my job. And this helps if the interest rate decline. So people will never give up their 3% mortgage rate when the mortgage rates are 7% or 8%. But 6%, they say, numbers are not good, but what the heck? I need to move. So be on the lookout for more sellers as interest rate begins to descend. Consequently, let me just pass on to the last slide. Okay, the last slide. The forecast slide is that home sales. The green is existing home sales. The red bar is home builders. So again, home builders have done well, and they will continue to do well. But the green will begin to reverse and increase in 2024. You are already seeing it in Nashville. Again, Nashville is one of the first early indicator or early recovery market. And then this will continue into next year. Maybe we get back to pre-COVID levels next year. But as you think about the next 10 years, 70 million more people, just inevitable that probably 8 of those 10 years would be an improving year. So thank you for coming, thanks for listening, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yoon, for your time today. We really appreciate you making the time to come here and be in person with us. Okay. Here at Greater Nashville Realtors, we know the value that our realtor members bring to our clients and communities, and that's why it's so important that as an association, we provide you with the tools and resources needed to succeed. As a Greater Nashville Realtors member, you have access to several member benefits, and I would like to highlight just a couple of those for you today that are at no cost to you. Greater Nashville Realtors provides members complimentary prospect intelligence with ForeWarn, a proactive safety and intelligence app that provides instant knowledge prior to face-to-face engagements to better understand and address risk and property verification. More recently, your board of directors voted to add a benefits package, a media benefits package to all Greater Nashville Realtors members. This package includes complimentary digital subscriptions to the Nashville Business Journal, which is very exciting, and realestatenews.com, providing you with up-to-date insights, trends, and analysis from the forefront of the real estate industry on a local and national level. To learn more about these member benefits, scan the QR code on the screen or visit our website at greaternashvillerealtors.org. Coming up next is Jeff Height, Chief Economic Development Officer at the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, to discuss job growth and economic development in Middle Tennessee. It is 10:55 and we are starting again at 11. So take a really quick, short break, say hi to a vendor, and be back in your seats at 11. Thank you.